I'm very, very pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Lord Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. I think there's a danger that all of us from the platform will be pretty much saying the same sorts of things. So I apologise in advance if speakers during the day have some of the things that they're saying. I think Michael Edwards, I'm sorry I should be back in Birmingham this afternoon and I won't hear Michael, but I think I would very much like to have heard what he had to say, and I hope that some of the things that I'm going to talk about will actually have a resonance with what Michael's talking about as well this afternoon. I'm really glad we can do song and dance now. I have been persuaded not to sing. I was going to do a version of I Did It My Way, but you're spared that. What we can do, and what we've started off doing this morning, is to be able to laugh. And I was here 3 weeks ago in Northern Ireland, and my good friend Paul Goggins, the Minister of State from the Westminster Parliament, read me from the Sunday World a wonderful story about a volunteer who was protecting squirrels in her garden. And the really amusing bit about it was that she was called Mrs. Nut. You've had your fair share of nuts over the last couple of centuries, and you're coming out of it with people working together, pulling together, creating a civil and civic society which underpins the political changes that have taken place in Northern Ireland. I've seen over my lifetime people against all the odds who have been able to survive, who have been able to create a sense of community, who have been able to pull together in extended families in circumstances which would have floored those people who are much better off, who have much better circumstances, living in much better accommodation. And it's only because of that mutual support and mutual action that people have actually been able to survive over the generations. In fact, in the 19th century, across the United Kingdom, around 10% of the population belonged to some form of mutual group. It was mutual groups that actually created the embryo welfare state, the old goose and burial clubs, goose for Christmas, burial for obvious reasons. The early trade union movement that actually was built on people's volunteering and coming together and providing together in times of greatest need. And the welfare state, built on that, now needs to inculcate those values of commitment and community over again. I'm not a Johnny-come-lately on the volunteering side, because it is a danger of all of us who get to public speak that we talk about anything except what we've actually done ourselves. And some of you heard me say last night that when I was 16 I decided to volunteer, and I went down for a couple of years to see an old lady called Mrs. Plum. And I was leaving the area, the college I was at, and I went to tell her that I was going, and I really expected Mrs. Plum to say how grateful she was for all the time I'd committed to seeing her on a Saturday, and instead Mrs. Plum said how glad she was that she'd been able to make my life a little easier over the 2 years. And it is a mutual two-way process. People who are giving the greatest gift of all, which is of their time and of their being, actually get the most enormous reward. And at a time when, as Margaret was saying, more people are going to be unemployed here and across the United Kingdom and across the world, we actually need to know that retaining people's confidence and self-esteem will be achieved by people being engaged with the community around them. It isn't a substitute for paid work, it's a corollary of paid work. It's a way in which we can encourage those who have been long-term unemployed to be able to re-engage. It's a way in which those who immediately lose their job can keep contact with the social world around them. And we know that depression comes from people being literally confined to home, gradually losing contact with former workmates, people who have lost contact with friends. And therefore, there's a major issue for our health and well-being about what we're talking about today, and about giving and citizenship and volunteering. Some of you will know that I was heavily involved with my old professor and mentor, Bernard Crick, in getting citizenship teaching off the ground in schools in England and Wales. Obviously everything is devolved in different ways now across the UK, and people have different approaches, but we commenced the citizenship courses back in the 2000, we laid the order 2002, they came into our schools. And then we moved on to the issue of those coming into our community, seeking their home in our community from across the world, and we developed the citizenship programs and the ceremonies, which actually are held at Hillsborough Castle. I can't offer anything quite as grand in Sheffield, but the citizenship programs and the ceremonies for welcoming people who want to be naturalised UK citizens actually has been a tremendous boon, and people really warm to it. What is strange is that there is still an antagonism to developing that kind of commitment to citizenship and to being part of the community, the family that we are, from those actually born and brought up in our communities. And I am very keen that young people, not through some formalised ceremony, but young people moving from adolescence to adulthood should feel the value of volunteering, should feel the value that they can provide to others and that they're valued themselves. I hope over the next day or two, I may be wrong, that the Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, may have something to say about the twin pillars of community service and of volunteering, of engaging young people, and I hope we can do this in Northern Ireland, in school with active citizenship, so that the programmes of reaching out to the community that Tom Hartley was talking about can be part of the curriculum, and that we can build on that post-16 for young people to learn the value of their own commitment and to be able to give to others. If we can get that off the ground in a much more substantial way than it already exists, that would be a good thing. I make the distinction between community service and volunteering. I need to do this because I've been a trustee of, for 25 years I was a trustee of community service volunteers, and I know that everybody in the room who's committed to volunteering would kill me and others if we mixed up the elements of community service which might be part of tackling unemployment and engaging young people in education, and volunteering, which has to be voluntary. But the two can go alongside each other and hand in hand, and I hope we can get that right for the future. Bernard Crick was a great mentor of mine, and his commitment to active citizenship actually brought him to Northern Ireland. It was years after when I met him again, because I was a student of his at university, and I met him in a restaurant in London because we were about to engage with his working party on citizenship, and a number of politicians from Northern Ireland came in to the restaurant, and Bernard recognised them, and they came across and said hello to me, and Bernard looked up and they said, Professor Crick, and he said, because he had a terrible stutter, Bernard, who died in December, he said, I recognise some of you in the days when you weren't quite so peaceful as you are now, and one or two of them were from paramilitary organisations and had joined the political drive. And in the 1970s, Bernard was over here in Northern Ireland long before it was possible to do so, trying to get the political to subsume the paramilitary. And I went to see Bernard in the hospice that he was in Scotland in December, and he remained a wag. He couldn't help but introduce me to the nursing staff as his student. I was still his student, but he taught me that active citizenship was the glue that holds our society together, that without it we can have the formal politics, and we know we need the formal politics. In Defence of Politics was a book that Bernard wrote 45 years ago, which was about how to assert the elected, the democratic, over the unfettered market, over people's greed and self-interest. And of course, we now see the absolute imperative of reasserting that form of politics here and globally. Think global, act local has never been more opportune.